Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hello everyone, my name is Matthew. I'm the game master and producer of an actual play tabletop role-playing game podcast called The Crow's Codex. If you're unfamiliar with the term actual play, this would be something like what Critical Role or Dimension 20 are up to, if you know those names. Much thanks to the Fun and Games podcast for giving me an outlet to talk about a game I appreciate quite a lot. We'll talk about it, but if you'll indulge me, some things take a bit of a lead up to explain why we fall in love. This is especially true of things we never expected we could ever love. May of 2024 was a month unlike any others in my life. After ignoring a minor oil leak in my car, which had been present for a full year prior, I decided to finally get it checked out before I went for one of the longest drives I've ever done. Certainly the longest drive I've ever done solo. The mechanics couldn't figure out where the oil leak was coming from, and while it may have been wise to delay my plans and go forth only when I knew it was completely sure there would be no issues, I chose adventure instead. On the 15th, a 5-hour drive later, arriving only with my camera equipment, a few changes of clothes, a battery pack, a gallon of spring water, and a baguette, I arrived in Desert Island, the home of Acadia National Park, Maine. I was well and truly alone. Not a soul from my past life knew where I would be for the next 48 hours, and quite frankly, neither did I. Sleep was made intentionally sparse. There was far too much to see and do. I was constantly on a timer. Between the gas tank, my slowly dwindling phone battery, which I desperately needed for navigation, and the inevitable decline of my car's engine from the leak, I had to make the best of my trip in as little time as I could. Despite the threat of engine troubles, I became acquainted with my car in a way that I never had before. It was more than just a thing I used to get around. My 2013 Chevy Malibu was my lifeline. By no means did I go off-roading, but sometimes the roads in Maine aren't the most cared for, and charting your course from one spot to another can sometimes be a puzzle in its own right. As the locals like to say, you can't get there from here. In Acadia National Park, primarily keeping the company of trees, I stopped considering what other people may think of me. It was the off-season, and while there were some tourists and a good number of locals when I was on the road, I was mostly alone. It helped that I decided to take my trip in the middle of the work week, so my daytime hours were spent on roads with no traffic, and cliffs, where the only real sounds were the wind and the leaves, and some birds. Of the people I did encounter, I wouldn't see any of them possibly ever again in my life. Eventually, my behavior really changed. The sort of change you take on when you know you have the weekend to yourself, and no one will be visiting. Convention goes out the window. You exist in ways you normally wouldn't. At home, this may look like pants being optional, or drinking a beer in the shower as a perfectly cromulent thing to do. In my case, locking the doors of my car was, by this point, quite unnecessary. Closing them wasn't even needed many times. For a few hours one day, I didn't even close my trunk between stops on the road, since I would just be going back in there soon anyways. There was no one around to tell me I had to close it. At one point, the check engine light came on, and I politely asked it to go away. I asked for this favor out loud. I can't tell you why I did this, but it felt like the right thing to do at the moment. Since we had developed something of a rapport with each other, hopefully, my car obliged. On May 29th, I arrived in the Olympic Peninsula of Washington State. I was again alone with the only stuff I could fit into my car. The main difference in this trip, though, was that I never left my house. Cruising down a questionable road in a car I was only just acquainted with, I remember feeling exactly the same way that I felt in Acadia National Park. I was out there, among the trees, and alone save for my car. We would again become very well acquainted. Pacific Drive is a survival game released on February 22nd, 2024, published by Ironwood Games. In it, you play as an unnamed driver who's forced by a roadblock into encroaching upon something called the Olympic Exclusion Zone. There, the player is almost as alone as I was during my solo vacation, with the exception of some one-way radio communication from a handful of quirky scientists. They guide you through some objectives in the zone, but on the whole, you're on your own, save for your untrustworthy station wagon, who sometimes seems to have a mind of their own. The story of Pacific Drive is not what made it a special piece of media to me. It was the relationship that I formed with the car that stuck with me for so long. Prior to my vacation, and Pacific Drive, I was fairly agnostic to cars in general. It was a method for me to get to work, manage my adult responsibilities, and sap my bank account every year when it came time for repairs. Here among the pines, with the looming threat of an incoming storm, I felt a connection. The station wagon doesn't directly talk to you. It's not like GLaDOS from Portal, and it's not like the car from Knight Rider. If you're old enough to know what that is, here's your reminder to drink some water and stretch your back. The station wagon does talk to you, though. It just speaks in a language you have to learn to listen for. Part of this is how hands-on so much of Pacific Drive is. Although you don't have to manually shift your car between gears, you do have to manage the shifter by physically looking down with your mouse or controller and putting the car into drive. You also have to manually put it into park so that when you leave the vehicle, it doesn't start rolling away to have its own adventure without you. It's not at all uncommon for new players to have this exact thing happen to them. The car either running off on its own or sliding backwards down a hill, with the driver's side door open as if waving goodbye. Those two must be closed manually. The gameplay loop of Pacific Drive is pretty simple, actually. You drive further into the exclusion zone to scavenge materials to upgrade and repair your car, do story objectives, and then get back to the safety of your garage via a gateway system. This isn't a simple, I'm ready to leave, so let's go to the portal type situation. Every time you decide to head back, you tell the computer in your car to open a gateway, and immediately a timer starts. The portal is opened in one of a few specific possible spots on the map, and it's time for a race against the clock. The game purposefully blocks off spots on the map which would be too close to you, so every time you do this, it's a wager. Can I get to this spot before it's too late? Once open, a destabilizing storm floods the area, and you must drive your car frantically towards the gate before the storm strips your car of its meager protections, before it takes away the only thing between you and exposure to the elements. Pacific Drive is ostensibly a game about collecting resources, following plot lines, and ultimately freeing yourself of the prison that is both the zone and your compulsion to stay with your car. In the fiction of the game, this compulsion is a real thing, which explains why someone wouldn't just immediately try to leave on foot. This is a good thing, because realistically you wouldn't make it out in time before the storms roll in and remove you from the equation. In the fiction, it's also a bad thing, because it will slowly but surely drive you insane. The compulsion is also a natural feeling I had without being asked to. I was already growing attached to this thing. In the game, your car may suddenly take on quirks for reasons you don't quite understand. This is something I've experienced myself in real life when I was younger, and wanted a better radio than the one that came in my Hyundai Elantra. One of my real-world car's quirks was that the radio would turn off intermittently. I would have to open the hood, pull a contact off the battery, then clasp it back in place to get functionality back. This drove me nuts because it would also reset the time on the clock. In-game, you may discover that turning your steering wheel to the left will cause your headlights to switch off. It's possible that you'll encounter a quirk where braking causes the windshield wipers to start wiping. It's also possible that honking your horn will make your car go faster, which is a feature we all know one person in our lives would use without prejudice. Maybe that person is you. As a roguelike, every game session begins from your garage, a grungy little spot with ambiance which feels exactly like every car enthusiast's garage I've ever seen. That is, minus the posters of women in bikinis. There's some fairly unusual equipment here, one of the most used ones being the crafting table, where you draft new parts for your car as well as new tools for use in the field. There's also a machine for scrapping stuff you don't need into base material components, a machine for recharging the battery of your car, and a spot to refuel. Fairly into the game, you'll unlock cosmetics, which help you make the station wagon fit your style more and more. You'll be at the whim of the zone when it comes to what cosmetics you find, but new paint colors, decals, and stickers become plentiful. You'll find something that suits your personality almost assuredly. In the real world, I typically don't add these things to my vehicles, but I was more than happy to slap a big flame decal on one side and some neon flowers on the other. Then the zone will methodically rip, tear, dissolve, and, in the most thorough way it can, destroy the work you've put into the vehicle. That's something which is expected both in-game and in real life. The difference, of course, being that swapping out tires, replacing a panel or window, even swapping out the entire engine of the car is done with only a few button presses, and methodically moving the parts away. My time replacing these parts and fixing small issues was never something I dreaded like I would in real life. Normally these things are only replaced with hard-earned money, time, and when doing it yourself, hours of bloody, dirty, sweaty labor. A video game has the advantage of compressing these activities into something which almost resembles a flow state. Roll in, patch the tires, fix a few panels, replace the front bumper for the third time in a row, refuel, and get back on the road. All these things happen quickly and almost autonomously after a while. That's one of the things that makes Pacific Drive so special. In the real world, I would never derive joy from swapping tires or fixing the headlights on my car. Part of this is because cars aren't made to be repaired like they used to. I know people for whom cars are one of the great passions in their life, and I never understood that appeal. The other part of this is if I elected to repair my car in my free time, there's no way I would know if I could get the job done by the end of the night and have the thing drivable in the morning. I've never really had a life where I could either afford a project car or had space for the two when I could afford it. There was never any excitement, like in Pacific Drive when I suddenly lost engine power and had to limp the thing to the nearest spot to get it patched up. That's the kind of situation which ruins a day in real life, not in the game. The worst thing that can happen is the run fails and you have to try another one. Maybe you physically kick the car the last few feet into the gateway and must throw away damn near everything that it's made out of. The point of all this is that Pacific Drive made me want to like that sort of thing in real life. I'm genuinely not convinced that a different kind of media would have the same effect on me. Reading about someone's romanticized experience of road tripping with an antique car never made me feel any sort of attachment to one. Songs about trucks did the opposite. The interactivity, I think, is the special sauce here. When I finished the game, I went on local listings to see if I could find a station wagon just like it. I was so enamored by the time I had with my fake wagon that I couldn't shake the feeling in real life. I wanted one that I could care for and ultimately put way too much time and money into. This had never happened to me before. I did find some listings for cars that looked exactly like my digital one, many of which I could technically afford, but passed the idea by one of my actually automotive-inclined friends, and they helpfully talked me out of making a terrible financial decision. Still wanted it, though. Still do. Pacific Drive does something that only art can do. It expresses an aspect of humanity. In this case, it's a relationship with a car beyond just get me to the damn place I need and hold my coffee cup. Nothing before it made me appreciate cars, and I'm not convinced that anything after it will make me appreciate cars either. Certainly not mine. At the end of 2025, I finally addressed that oil leak. I'll be more than happy if I never have to look under the hood with a flashlight ever again. At least, not in real life. Thanks to Pacific Drive, I can always satisfy the urge to drive a shitbox around in inclement weather and treacherous terrain, not knowing if I'll make it back in one piece. I also know that my station wagon, who likes to pop the hood every time I put the car in reverse, will be waiting for me when I revisit the great unknown. Happy gaming.
This is We Burlesque.
Hi, this is Victor Vaughn, and I run the We Burlesque Podcast Network. I am currently in my
7th
season of the We Burlesque Podcast, which began, so many episodes ago, and I've been so delighted and intrigued to learn about our colleagues and our friends in the industry. So if you enjoy being a wallflower in the dressing room and hearing all about what we do, why we do it, and what's left to do, please go to Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google, Libsyn, and probably some other ones I don't even know about. Oh, we're on Audible now. How neat is that? We're on frickin' Audible. Oh, So go to your platform of choice, hit subscribe when you find We Burlesque. That's WEBURLESQUE. I should know how to spell it by now. So, or you can go to WeBurlesquePodcast.com. That's all one word. That's WEBURLESQUEPODCAST.com. Yeah, that should do it. Or on Instagram at WEBURLESQUE. That's it. Hi. So, anyway, be well, be safe, and let's talk.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.